5 seconds to the open.
Ready?
Who wants to get this thing started right about now?
Welcome to Follow the Money Weekly with your host, Jerry Robinson.
Welcome.
Not just some guru.
Oh, really?
Your host is an economist and a best-selling author.
What an interesting news item. I'd better write that down.
And just someone who likes to make money and help you to make money. Welcome to Follow the Money Weekly. And here he is, Jerry Robinson.
Friends, welcome to you all around the world. Welcome to this episode of the Follow the Money podcast, episode number 505. Today's episode entitled, War is Peace. Yes, that phrase, of course, comes from George Orwell's 1984. It was the slogan of a regime that had kept its population in a constant state of managed fear and perpetual conflict. And whether you realize it or not, I believe we're watching something very eerily familiar unfold right here in the United States. At the end of last month, it was February 28th, the United States, alongside Israel, launched coordinated strikes on Iran. We were told that it was necessary. We were told that it was defensive. We were told that it was about maintaining stability. And yet, according to numerous reports and from the White House officials themselves, from their own mouths, Pentagon officials included, they have acknowledged that there was no sign that Iran was about to attack the United States first. And at the same time, right before these strikes happened, virtually no one wanted to take on a new war in the Middle East. And right when the bombs began to drop, the data still show that only 1 out of 4 Americans supported the strikes. The majority, in fact, that have been polled believe the president is too willing to use military force. Remember, after all, the campaign promise of no more wars. Remember the campaign promises of transparency. Remember the promise of peace through strength. And instead, we have another war in the Middle East. We have escalation. So in this episode, what I want to do is take a look at the hard facts surrounding the Iran strikes and also the political timing in which they have occurred. I also, in segment 2, I want to take a step back and look at the markets and see how all of this is playing out in the economy, in the markets, to see what that looks like. And then, of course, we'll close out the show in segment 3 with some concluding thoughts and a final word. Remember, this episode is not about partisanship. It is about patterns that we see in our government. That is the never-ending pattern of war. Let's talk about it.
A vote for Donald Trump is a vote for a man who wants to end wars, not start them.
We do not want war with Iran. We actually want peace. The Iranians are clearly not very good at war. Perhaps they should follow President Trump's lead and give peace a chance.
These war hawks, they want to draft your kids to die in wars, and they will never fight themselves. You know, we'll stay around the country for 15 years, just bomb the hell out of everybody, make everybody miserable. Nobody knows why we're there, you know, the wars that never end. These endless wars that we've been in, I've gotten us out of so many. We don't want to get into wars. We're tired of fighting. I'm the only president in the last 84 years that didn't start a war. Under Trump, we will have no more wars. No more wars. No more wars. We will have prosperity and peace. We will have prosperity and we will have peace. Remember, I'm the president of peace. They said, he will start a war. I'm not going to start a war. I'm going to stop wars. He's going to start a war. I said, no. My rhetoric is going to keep us out of wars, and that's what happened. My proudest legacy will be that of a peacemaker. That's what I want to be, a peacemaker. We will measure our success not only by the battles we win, but also by the wars that we end, and perhaps most importantly, the wars we never get into. Our president will start a war with Iran because he has absolutely no ability to negotiate. He's weak and he's ineffective. I believe that he will attack Iran sometime prior to the election because he thinks that's the only way he can get elected. Isn't it pathetic?
Let's dive in and talk about what we have been seeing and witnessing in the month of March 2026. The United States, alongside Israel, launching coordinated strikes on Iran. This was not a defensive retaliation against an active Iranian attack on the United States. Let's make it clear. According to reporting across the globe, Pentagon officials told Congress that there was no sign that Iran was about to attack the United States first. And nevertheless, that's what we continue to hear out of some of our leaders' mouths. And yet here we are once again being asked to accept escalation, in the absence, by the way, of a clearly defined immediate threat to the homeland. Right? This is not the first time that we have heard this urgency around Iran. Iran has allegedly been 6 weeks away from making a nuclear weapon for roughly 25 years, maybe even 30 years. We're always told that Iran is just weeks away from a nuclear bomb. And then those weeks turn into months, and those months turn into years, and those years turn into decades. And we still don't have any kind of imminent threat to the United States from Iran, according to the Pentagon. Very few people supported this war at the outset. And the majority believe the president is too willing to use military force. And yet the bombs dropped anyway. So here we are again with new headlines about a rogue regime that wants to develop weapons of mass destruction. We have this new urgency that doesn't have hardly any evidence at all. It's the same narrative we heard in the build-up to the 2003 illegal Iraq War and the illegal invasion of Afghanistan. And this current administration, like many before it, campaigned on restraining itself from causing the United States to enter a new war, let alone an illegal war that wasn't even declared by Congress. This administration, in fact, campaigned on the phrase, "no more wars." Trump called himself the peace president, right? And he even demanded a Nobel Peace Prize because he was such a peacemaker, according to him. And now we are in the thick of yet another war that is threatening to go global, if it already hasn't. We see that Russia is providing aid to Iran. We see China is providing aid to Iran. And yet the United States finds itself isolated after slapping punitive tariffs on many of our allies, if not all of our allies, over the last several months. And after publicly berating our allies to their faces, the United States now finds itself in need of help. From who? From its allies. And its allies aren't so excited about joining into another illegal forever war. Who can blame them? Not only did this current administration campaign on no more wars, it also campaigned on transparency to release the Epstein files, which it has failed to do. At the same time, as we're dealing with all of these things, the Supreme Court recently dealt a major blow to the White House by basically calling its use of tariffs against the globe as unconstitutional, declared them unconstitutional, said they were basically illegal. Now companies want their money back, and who can blame them? If you pay money, if the government illegally seizes money from you, and then the Supreme Court of the land says, that's illegal, government, you can't do that. Are you going to be in line getting your money back? I mean, if you're a rational actor, I would assume you will. Costco is a rational actor. They're demanding their money back. FedEx is a rational actor. They're asking for their money back that they paid illegally to the United States through these tariffs. So you have political pressure building here domestically. You have public trust in institutions at historic lows. And now, suddenly, with all this pressure, we find the nation is uniting around a foreign conflict, another foreign war. The scripts literally write themselves, right? You have pressure building upon the United States, and it's a classic wag the dog, look over here, and suddenly we have a new distraction, right? So that the United States is kept in a perpetual state of fear and conflict. So you have a pattern. The pattern is obviously clear, and it's not unique to one president. It's not unique to one party. It happens under Republicans. It happens under Democrats. It's happened under every modern administration. War has been used successfully by previous administrations to get the headlines out of the news that they want out of the news and to put new and to inject new headlines about the war into the media, also to silence dissent. Right? War has a very powerful way of simplifying the overall narrative and then silencing the dissent, reframing the whole narrative, and then demanding unity from the American people. Otherwise, you're unpatriotic because you don't support a new forever war. Meanwhile, the debt just keeps rising. The national debt here in the United States just crossed $39 trillion. There is not a peep in Washington about our national debt, right? There's not a peep coming out of the usual suspects who tell us how bad the debt is. Now suddenly it's crickets in Washington about the debt as it spirals out of control. Right now in fiscal year 2026, we are 5 months in to fiscal year 2026, which began back in October. And as of February, with all the data we have now, the United States has dug another $1 trillion deficit in the first 5 months of this fiscal year. The CBO is projecting a $2.4 trillion annual deficit for the next decade. So that means that every year we'll be digging a bigger and bigger hole and basically driving the national debt to incredible highs over the next decade. As our national debt is soaring, our civil liberties here in the United States are shrinking. The United States government, which was set up to serve as a public servant to the people, instead now find that the people are serving the interests of the federal government. At the same time that people are seeing higher gas prices and higher oil prices and hearing broken promises coming from Washington in a never-ending stream, the American people are also finding out that there's really no accountability for the elite whenever they break the law. Many people are expressing outrage at how the establishment, the Washington establishment, even the media, is handling the Epstein files, where we know that there are a lot of terrible things in those files, and yet no one is being charged because many of the people who were involved were not, let's just be honest, they weren't immigrants, right? They weren't minorities, right? Instead, they were billionaires. And billionaires in this country get a pass when they break the law. If you don't believe that from the Epstein files, then go back to the Panama Papers. Remember that? Or the Paradise Papers. Whenever we saw a leak, an incredible leak about the offshore tax havens that billionaires were using to hide their wealth and prevent themselves from having to pay rightful taxes. How many people went to jail with the release of those papers? Hardly anyone. I think there was maybe one person that even got charged. Okay, so my point is that if you're a billionaire in this system, you can bribe and cajole your way out of all manner of problems. And the American people, the working class citizens of this country, see this. They can't unsee it. And now they're being asked to fund a war that hasn't even been declared when inflation is still high, and with oil prices going higher and housing being unaffordable, and people not being able to afford their student loans, and people can't afford health care, and people can't afford to buy their first house, and new cars are becoming unaffordable to the average citizen. And yet if you turn to the White House, you'll see that Mr. Trump has doubled his net worth since getting back into office. The corruption stinks to high heaven. So the American people would do themselves a favor to wake up and realize that every president of the modern era has campaigned as a peacemaker, every single last one of them, and yet the bombs keep falling. The faces change in the Oval Office, but the rhetoric sounds exactly the same. The justifications change, but the pattern doesn't change. We were told that it was urgent that we go into Iraq and to liberate the Iraqi people. It turned out that whole war was rooted and based in lies. We were told that Libya was a humanitarian crisis and that we had to go in and do something. We, of course, went in without authorization from Congress, We were told that Syria required our intervention. We were told that Afghanistan was just a temporary situation, turned out to be our longest war. Vietnam, based upon the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, not a declaration, right? We had involvement in Yemen, which had no congressional authorization. We simply cannot afford to keep bombing the world, let alone bombing people, which is immoral in the first place. And secondly, especially when you consider that the majority of people who are dying in these countries are not evil dictators or military folks. The majority of people who've died in all of these conflicts are civilians. They're people like you and me. They're people like you and your spouse or your child. That's who these people who are dying right now are. And we don't have any answers even as to why we are there here in the year 2026 as we invade Iran. Now we're being told that Iran is necessary, but we're getting conflicting reports. We've even had high-level defections from the executive branch, from people who are saying this is a completely illegal war and it is not being waged in good faith. I believe the American people deserve clarity. I believe they deserve the truth. The truth is, when a government uses force, absent any imminent threat, then it basically lowers the threshold for future force. And this is how we normalize these kinds of illegal wars. Now, I want to be clear that this is not about being pro-Iran, right? I'm not defending Iran. I don't want to minimize the real geopolitical risks that exist out there in the world, but we're asking real questions here, such as what is the actual threshold for war, right? Is it an imminent threat? Is it all based upon political calculations? Is it something that we can't even clearly define? Do we even know how to define when we should go to war? We haven't done it since World War II. See, I believe it's possible to still support your country and question its wars, right? You can respect the office while still questioning the decisions that send our men and women into harm's way. I don't think it's being disloyal to ask these questions. I believe, in fact, it's our duty, it's our responsibility. Because if we allow force to become normalized without any clear, immediate necessities, then it's going to become routine. And it already has, quite frankly, here in the United States. That's what I've built my case here on, is the fact that we have a pattern of illegal war after illegal war. And there's really not much to show for it. There's not much to show for it. How did you benefit from the Iraq war? How did you benefit from the Afghanistan war? The people in Afghanistan and Iraq have lived underneath a terrorism in many ways since those wars. How have you benefited from the Libya war? How did you benefit from the Yemen war? Do you know who benefits from these wars? Gulf countries and Israel, right? The Gulf countries, the Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Israel. They're the ones who are benefiting. You are not benefiting from these wars. And yet you are required to pay for them, and you are the one who is expected to send your son and daughter in to fight these wars. So I could go on, and there's plenty to talk about, but I believe that Iran is an imperial trap, and that America just walked right in. Hey friends, this is Jerry Robinson from Follow the Money Weekly. Recently, we have been receiving many emails from our listeners commenting on the great help they're getting from our precious metals expert, Tom Cloud. Gold and silver are excellent hedges against the growing threat of coming U.S. inflation. Who's your gold guy? Make it Tom Cloud. With over 30 years experience with precious metals, Tom will answer all of your questions. Don't buy your gold and silver through some call center and pay inflated prices. Call my good friend Tom Cloud and speak directly with him and get all of your questions answered. For a limited time, Tom is offering free shipping and insurance on every gold and silver purchase made by our listeners. Call 800-247-2812. And when you do, tell him that Jerry Robinson from Follow the Money Weekly sent you, and he'll throw in that free shipping and insurance on your entire order. Call your gold guy, Tom Cloud, right now for the very best deals on gold and silver coins. 800-247-2812. That is 800-247-2812.
Welcome back to Follow the Money Weekly. And here's Jerry Robinson.
All right, friends, welcome back to the Follow the Money podcast. My name is Jerry Robinson. Great to be here right along with you. We're stepping into segment 2. We're going to talk about the markets here, not because money matters than the lives that are being lost right now, but because markets really often reveal what policymakers fear. The markets could often move policymakers to change their mind, right? So in other words, the markets play an interesting role in a time of war and in a time of political chaos like we have today. So what I want to do is I just want to go through some of the top markets and kind of show you what we're looking at right now. It's been very interesting to see how the markets have reacted to the overall war going on in Iran. Obviously, oil prices. Oil prices have been very wild, and I don't need to tell you that because you've been seeing it. Of course, it's been trickling down into the average price of gas and diesel gasoline now over $5 a gallon. We have the average price of a gallon of gas nearing $4 now here in the United States. And of course, that's to be expected when you have something like the Iran war going on, where the Iran war has led that Strait of Hormuz, that very important and strategic choke point that sits right between Iran and Oman. Right there, that Strait of Hormuz is where about 20% of the world's oil flows through. And we've basically seen that Strait of Hormuz come to a standstill since the bombing began in late February, early March. So Iran has closed the strait and has left it closed. Now, it's actually let a few ships through. It's making deals with certain countries, some countries offering to pay with Chinese yuan to get their ships through. Others who don't have ambassadors from the United States in their countries or from Israel, they're being allowed to pass through. But for the most part, Western nations have been pretty much shut out. And there's really been not a lot of progress on that front because the strait remains closed and the bombing is going back and forth. Now, the markets calmed down a little bit early on because the president made the comment that the war was over, like in the first week, right? It's just basically over. He says, it's pretty much over, he said. In week 2, he claimed that we were winning the war that we had already won. And then in week 3, we were told that the president told us that we needed help from our allies because, and I don't know why, considering that we'd already won the war or that we were winning the war. And then, of course, he began to berate our allies. And now this is just kind of where we stand. So the United States has really left itself isolated. There does not seem to be a plan to get the Strait of Hormuz open. And now oil prices are back on their ascent. So they surged very big. West Texas Intermediate hit at $120 a barrel briefly. The same thing for Brent crude. Ironically, that Brent didn't go too much higher, although there's probably some good reasons for that. But I don't want to discuss those now. But the point is that both Brent and West Texas Intermediate, the two major, blends of oil that the world is powered by, both of these now going back higher. But the markets calmed down a bit early on whenever they thought that, according to President Trump, that everything was calming down and that the United States had basically won. Now that is not so clear. That Strait of Hormuz still is closed. As I had mentioned, there is no foreseeable event that's going to open that Strait of Hormuz. I can't even imagine what that would be, short of some sort of concession upon the between the two countries, but the three countries, Israel and U.S., of course, doing this together against Iran. But when we look at the price of oil, we see it is probably the biggest beneficiary here of all of this, right? Oil companies and bomb makers and defense companies, right? This is what we're seeing. Although the bomb makers haven't gone up as much as normal, but the crude oil prices certainly are. As I sit here, I'm looking at about $98 West Texas Intermediate crude oil. Remember, those were hanging down in the $50 to $60 range for quite some time, not really doing much. So they've practically doubled and then backed off from that level. Brent crude was around the same price, around $60 or so. Now it's sitting at 110 as I record this broadcast. So certainly we are seeing oil really lead the way higher. And the problem with that, as you probably know, is that oil is an input cost into pretty much everything, right? Almost any product is going to require oil, even if it doesn't take oil in the product itself or in the good itself, it's going to require oil to transport it, right? So oil goes into everything. And I've often talked about how you'll have a big bull market rally, but when energy finally rallies, it tends to be the deal killer, right? It often tends to crush the rally. And so we have not fully seen that yet, but if you look at a chart of the S&P 500, which is again one of the most important markets to follow, in my opinion, if you're an investor or a trader in the United States or around the United States, when you're watching the United States, the S&P 500 is so important. And right now, the S&P is sitting just above its rising 200-day moving average, which is currently around 6,600. You break down below that level, then you have a major 6,500 support, and we would move into a demand zone from about 6,150 to about 6,500. That would be the range where I could see the S&P coming back down into if we do not see a bounce off of that 200-day moving average. But I got to admit, we are really not too far away from our recent all-time high. We got up around 7,000. Now we're sitting at about 6675 or so on the S&P. So it's not like we've backed off that much. We're not really too far away from a new all-time high. And quite frankly, if we see this war come to an end sooner rather than later, which I think we're all praying for, then not only will we have more lives saved and less carnage and less pieces to pick up in the end, but also the markets will probably react to that in a good way, because the markets are confused right now and are not sure how long this war is actually going to last. The market doesn't even really seem to know why we're doing this. And so it's a little confusing right now, of course, for many people. If we look at the NASDAQ 100, it's the same way. I'm looking at QQQ, the Invesco NASDAQ 100 ETF chart, and I see the price coming all the way back almost now to the 200-day moving average. Again, you break down below that. On QQQ, that's around 590. So if you break down below 590 on QQQ, the ETF, that's going to suggest that we are now below the 200-day for the first time in almost a year, right? So that would be an interesting signal that the market is turning down. But so far, it's held up and proven to be pretty resilient. If we look at gold, you might think that gold is doing well in this environment with so much fear, but actually it's been pulling back as we've seen money flows going into the US dollar, right? So the dollar has been kind of propped up right now. It hasn't gone up that much, by the way, which is kind of interesting. And that's why we probably haven't seen gold go down that much. Gold is just still hovering right around that $5,000 area, very key area on gold. The 50-day moving average right now is the area that is held so well for gold. And right now, that level is about 49.50. So if we close below 49.50 on physical gold, that could suggest to us that we are going to see a bit more of a sell-off. We could come down even to the $4,600 level, maybe even down to the $4,400 level. We'll just have to kind of watch this space here as far as gold. Of course, it's still trading well below its $5,600 high that it hit, back in January, right? Back in January, we saw that huge surge. And then as far as the U.S. dollar, as I had mentioned, it surged up to the 100 level. The U.S. dollar index, it had been hanging down to the 97, 98 level, and it's back up there now. But unless things really pick up even more with this war, I suspect that the dollar has kind of done its thing. Now, of course, it can always go higher. And one reason why we might see the dollar go higher, aside from this war, is what we hear out of the Federal Reserve today. So today is FOMC day. We're going to hear the Federal Reserve issue their latest policy decision later today. I don't have that in front of me now, but I can tell you what I expect. I expect no rate cut. I expect possibly the first time in 40 years to see, about 38 years or so, to see the Fed actually have 3 dissents in its policy decision. And that's pretty interesting. There's 3 Fed governors who are very pro-Trump, and they want to cut rates. And we may get all 3 of them to dissent today. And again, that would be pretty historic. You'd have to go back for several decades to see that happen again. Well, anyway, if the idea is that we're not going to cut rates, and we're not going to cut rates anytime this year, which I don't believe right now. In fact, the market's still pricing in 1 rate cut this year. But, if we get the latest economic projections from the Fed and we hear all of this, and then we see that it appears like, okay, we're not going to be cutting rates anytime soon, that could also give the dollar a boost. So you may see more upside pressure on the dollar as a result of whatever happens in the FOMC meeting or related, headlines around that. So that's something to keep in mind. We'll certainly be watching that Fed meeting, presser, latest economic projections. I'm going to put out an email about it tonight to all of our members, letting them know what we think about that and our latest analysis. Also, let's talk about, China's actually been holding up pretty well on all of this. The Chinese stock market off of its highs, like the United States markets as well, but they're actually holding up pretty well considering all of the chaos. Silver has been struggling around that $80 level after getting up around $120 or whatever it was, in late January. It's really pulled back all the way to like 65 or so, and then it's rebounded. But now it's kind of hovering around its 30 SMA. It's an area that I look at a lot on silver. It's actually lost that area, and it's trading below $80 right now. 80 is a really big line in the sand there for silver. It's been an area where we've seen hold since the rebound back in February. We'll be keeping our eyes on silver to see what might be going on with that market. But as I mentioned, oil just continues to dominate. It's really dominating the whole situation. We see rates going back higher. 30-year fixed mortgage rates here in the United States were down below 5% or below 6%. Briefly. Now they're moving back higher. But right now, one of the things we need to keep our eyes on is the rise in inflation. We got some February PPI numbers. The wholesale prices here in the United States came out earlier this morning. We saw that they jumped much higher than we had expected. The economists were looking for about a 2.9% year-over-year increase in U.S. wholesale prices, and we got a 3.4% year-over-year. So that was significantly higher. And remember that these data points that we're getting right now regarding inflation do not include the surge in oil prices since the beginning of March. We're not going to see those numbers until the month of March, right? So we got to get through the month of March, and then we'll be looking at that data, and we'll be able to see what oil prices has done. And rising gas prices, of course, also are going to put upward pressure on, on inflation. We've really seen those higher gas prices and oil prices translate into surging jet fuel prices, which I don't know if you've looked at cost of airfare lately, but just since this war began, we've seen a marked surge in airfare costs. I was just looking up a flight that I was going to take, and this is just anecdotal. I mean, this is just something that happened to me personally, but I was trying to, I was going to book a flight. And I looked at the price, and literally just in a matter of a month, the price had gone up quite a bit. Regardless, there's a lot going on right now. And also, one more thing that I want to mention, I'm not going to get into it too much here, but we are starting to see a little bit of a rebound in crypto, which has really kind of languished over the last few months. And we just got some news out of, I'll close with this, we got to move on to our final segment, but the SEC just formally classified 16 different cryptocurrencies as digital commodities that are not securities. So that includes things like Bitcoin and Ether and Solana, and the whole list has been released by the SEC and the CFTC. So that's really good news that we're starting to see some movement there on the regulatory front. we're getting some clarity here on digital assets. All right, friends, welcome back to the final moments of today's episode. And I just want to say that beyond the markets and beyond politics and partisanship and all of this, there's something much deeper at stake that I hope you hear me saying in this episode. It's in moments like these that it's very easy to retreat into our tribes, right? Back behind our tribal lines. If my side does it, it must be justified. And if your side does it, it must be evil, right? And that reflex that we have here in the United States, that political partisan reflex, is literally killing us. War is not a red issue. It's not a blue issue. It is a human issue. And every time we normalize wars of aggression that are not even declared legally and constitutionally, every time we excuse it because of some strategic purpose, every time we frame it as bringing stability, we drift a little further from what we claim to value. You see, empires always speak the language of security. They always tell their citizens the escalation against the other is required or necessary. They always promise that it'll be limited, but history suggests otherwise. And now, let me leave you with a final word, this time from Dorothy Day, a strong anti-war voice of the last century, when she wrote, "All you have to do is compare what the gospel asks and what war does. The gospel asks that we feed the poor, give drink to the thirsty, clothe the naked, welcome the stranger, house the homeless, visit the prisoner, and perform works of mercy. But war does the opposite. It makes my neighbor hungry, thirsty, homeless, a prisoner, and sick. It kills them by the millions. The gospel asks us to take up our cross. War asks us to lay the cross on others." Now, you may or may not be a Christian out there listening to me today, someone who believes in Jesus. But I can tell you something that Jesus believes in, and he believes that we are to love our enemies. And I know that makes people uncomfortable. I know it makes governments uncomfortable. I know that it makes voters uncomfortable. But our discomfort with that statement doesn't make it untrue. Remember, when the bombs fall, it is not politicians who bleed out first. It's fathers, it's mothers, it's children, it's the elderly. We can analyze the markets, we can debate the policies, we can argue about the geopolitics, but we should never lose sight of this, that war does not make the world safer at all. Not in the short run, not in the long run. It hardens it, it brutalizes it, and it tempts us to believe that force can accomplish what mercy cannot. I believe one day, friends, we will see the end of war just as we saw the end of slavery. That when enough people become embarrassed by the heinous fact that we settle our disputes and our conflicts with bombs and guns and weapons, that one day in the future, people will look back at this time and say, what kind of Neanderthal thinking led us to think that we could solve our problems on this tiny planet by bombing each other? Just as the days of chattel slavery are now looked back upon with horror and disgust, I believe that we will look back on these days of brutal warfare as an embarrassing phase of humanity's history. So be careful which slogans you accept amid the propaganda for this war, and be careful when you hear war being sold as peace. And that is just something to think about. Remember, friends, when you want the truth about the global economy, just follow the money. Have a safe and prosperous week, and I'll see you right back here next time. Until then, God bless.
Contained on the Follow the Money podcast is strictly for informational and educational purposes. It should not be construed as specific investment advice. The views and opinions of our guests and sponsors, including Tom Cloud, are their own and do not necessarily represent the views of FTMDaily.com or Robinson Media Group, LLC. Jerry Robinson does hold an insurance license and at times may offer consulting on life insurance and fixed retirement income products. Follow-up, individualized responses to email or phone requests that involve the rendering of personalized investment advice for compensation will not be made absent compliance with state investment advisor registration requirements or an applicable exemption or exclusion and applicable insurance regulations. Past performance is not indicative of future results. You should be aware of the real risk of loss in following any strategy or investment discussed on the podcast. Remember, never do your financial planning through podcast or radio. It's your money. Be wise. Do your due diligence and always consult a trusted financial professional before making any financial decisions.